Okay, I'm going to do something just a little bit different because Pastor Melanie is watching us right there, right now, and I think we should greet her. I just have this feeling that we should greet her. So I'm not sure if we should say, "Hi, Pastor Mel," or "Get well, Pastor Mel" has a poetic element to it. We should probably decide on what it is we'll say, and let's make it simple and go, "Hi, Pastor Mel," on 3, big and loud, "Hi, Pastor Mel." 1, 2, 3. I hope it's working, and so these are actually not my words. These are Pastor Mel's words that I'm going to read for you. I am not going to be claiming that this is my teaching time or anything like that. But I want you to imagine Pastor Mel as the Apostle Paul. Okay? You got that? Pastor Mel is the Apostle Paul. And she has written a letter to the people of the church at FaithWorks. And so the letter shows up, and someone in the church has the privilege of reading that letter to the church. That's my privilege today, to read the letter, the epistle of Pastor Mel, to the FaithWorks community. So here it is. Dearest people of FaithWorks, we're in the season of Easter, and here we have another resurrection story. This one is about Tabitha, a woman who was well loved and known for her acts of charity. She was particularly devoted to the plight of widows who lived at the margins of society at the time, and was also a creative person, a maker of beautiful clothing. Tabitha was a remarkable woman. How appropriate that we think about her on this Mother's Day weekend. When Tabitha got sick and died, seemingly in the prime of her life, many gathered to grieve, but they weren't able to let her go. They sent out an urgent call for Peter to come from a neighboring town in the hope that he would perform a miracle. They had likely heard about how he had just healed a man who had been bedridden for 8 years. They knew Peter had been a disciple of Jesus, and that Jesus had raised 3 people from the dead during his ministry: his friend Lazarus, the daughter of Jairus, who was a leader at the synagogue, and a widow's son from the town of Nain. Maybe, just maybe, this disciple of Jesus would be able to raise Tabitha from the dead. This was their hope, and this was their faith. Now, before Peter's visit to Tabitha, here's what had happened. Now, as Peter went here and there among all the believers, he came down also to the saints living in Lydda. There he found a man named Aeneas, who had been bedridden for 8 years, for he was paralyzed. Peter said to him, "Aeneas, Jesus Christ heals you. Get up and make your bed." And immediately he got up, and all the residents of Lydda and Sharon saw him and turned to the Lord. Peter was an itinerant minister, visiting the Christian communities that had scattered throughout Judea because of intense persecution. The town of Lydda, where Aeneas was healed, was only 10 miles away from Joppa, where Tabitha was. So Peter made the journey by foot. When he arrived at Tabitha's home, he sent the mourners out of her room, knelt down in prayer, and then said to the dead woman, "Tabitha, get up." And she did. That compassionate command, "Tabitha, get up," echoes Jesus' words to Jairus' 12-year-old daughter when he raised her from the dead. Jesus said, "Little girl, get up." Peter was following the model Jesus had set for him, and he made it clear that it was Jesus who was doing the healing through Peter and not Peter himself. The result of these miracles was obviously restored health and life for Aeneas and Tabitha, but also newfound faith among those who saw what happened or heard about it. And all the residents of Lydda and Sharon saw and turned to the Lord. After Tabitha was raised from the dead, this became known throughout Joppa, and many believed in the Lord. The book of Acts is full of miracles in Jesus' name. Word spreads, and more people put their faith in him. It's the story of the early church and it is dramatic. But it's not all easy. There's also a lot of suffering because the church is being persecuted, and surely not everybody is healed. Life goes on after Jesus' resurrection with its challenges, but also with a new hope. The power of Jesus has filled and equipped his followers to do amazing, life-giving things in his name, and the result is that people in the broader community put their faith in Jesus. I wonder what life was like for Tabitha after she had been raised from the dead. She probably got a lot of attention. I mean, what a story. But when the media left, what did she do with her life? I'd venture a guess that she went right back to doing what she'd always done, good works and acts of charity. That's what the short obituary in our text says about her, right? I bet she got up and got going. There's so much in this story that we could explore further, but the phrase that has stayed with me as I've prepared for tonight is Peter's instruction to the dead woman, Tabitha, get up. I hear Jesus saying to Jairus' daughter, little girl, get up. I also hear, Melanie, get up. And FaithWorks, get up. Get up and live with hope. Live the resurrection. Get up and go. The Easter season isn't about everything being bright and shiny and perfect. It isn't about glossing over the difficult realities of life. But it is about hope. Hope in the midst of struggle. It's about a vision for a better day. It's about getting up out of the grave clothes and rising to a new life. Roger preached it in his Easter teaching time, quoting 2 Corinthians 5. If anyone is in Christ, there is a new creation. Everything old has passed away. See, everything has become new. So what does this mean for us? What new creation are we called to be? What would it look like for us to get up and go? Maybe we've developed unhealthy habits or ways of thinking that have become the grave clothes that we need to shake off. Maybe we, like Tabitha, need to be raised up so that we can get back to the good works and acts of charity that we're known for. As individuals and as a faith community, we're always in need of resurrection, aren't we? Because everyday pressures get us down, and we get tired, and we lose our vision, and we lose our hope. And when that happens, we can be a little bit lazy, a little apathetic. We forget who we're called to be. We've just lived through a 2-year pandemic and a long and stormy winter. She doesn't have that many O's in there. That was my little bit. That's the one divergence I will take from the script. A long and stormy winter. My household, John's household, is recovering from a flood in our basement right as I've moved to full-time work, which I haven't done since before having kids. We live in a small house, and because the basement is now a construction zone, Jordan and Nathan are sharing a tiny room. Sorry about that. And there's a guinea pig living in the middle of my kitchen. I'm not sure whose guinea pig this is. Oh, there you go. Granted, I'm not fleeing a war. My troubles are minor, but they are troubles. And some days I feel desperate for resurrection. At least the sun is shining. If you're struggling, reach out to someone for help, like the friends of Tabitha did. If you're noticing someone else who is struggling, walk the 10 miles like Peter did. Get down on your knees in prayer and do what you can to help. We need each other. We need God, and we need resurrection. Resurrection miracles are a gift from God, but our response to them is a choice that we make. Imagine if Peter had healed Aeneas and brought Tabitha back from the dead, and they both just kept lying in their beds. Peter went so far as to tell Aeneas to get up and make his bed, so the miracle would be fully realized. Peter said to him, "Aeneas, Jesus Christ heals you. Get up and make your bed." And he immediately got up. When God raises us out of some kind of darkness or death, we've got to get going. Gotta embrace life. Eugene Peterson calls it living the resurrection. In his book by that name, he says resurrection is at the center of who we are as followers of Jesus. It's lived when we maintain a sense of wonder at God's presence in our world in the ordinary stuff of life. When we gather like this in worship, and when we place ourselves in the company of friends. He writes, "The resurrection life is a practice. It's not something we practice like practicing musical scales or practicing our golf swing. It is a practice in the most inclusive sense, in which we say a physician has a practice. Work that defines both his or her character and workday. This is the sense in which we practice resurrection. We engage in a life that is so permeated by the presence and companionship of the resurrected Jesus in the company of friends. It's not something we go to retreat centers and conferences and special gatherings to practice, but rather the life of resurrection that is practiced in the dailiness of home and workplace. It might be as simple as rising out of the pandemic Netflix binge, none of us understand that, of course, to wash the windows or to go out with a friend. It might be feeding the guinea pig that's living, these are now her words, feeding the guinea pig that's living in the middle of your kitchen without fretting too much about the wood chips strewn all about. I guess there'd be other things other than wood chips as well, but never mind. It might be walking through the Assiniboine forest looking for birds and finding them. And it might be speaking truth to power and standing up for the oppressed and choosing peace over violence. On Thursday, I read an article in the Winnipeg Free Press about a meeting Pope Francis had with Patriarch Kirill, the leader of the Russian Orthodox Church. Kirill has been a vocal supporter of Putin and his war, using religious rhetoric to justify the invasion. Pope Francis, in contrast, has been repeatedly calling for an end to the war. So the Pope met with the Patriarch and called him out, challenging him to stop supporting Putin. He said to him, "Brother, we are not state clerics. We cannot use the language of politics, but that of Jesus. We are pastors of the same holy people of God. Because of this, we must seek avenues of peace to put an end to the firing of weapons." And now Pope Francis is requesting a meeting with Putin. That's one gutsy pope, and a pretty great example of living the resurrection. Easter calls us to action. So if God is saying to us, FaithWorks, get up, what does that look like? We're at a very interesting time in our life together as a community. This fall, we celebrate 20 years as FaithWorks. I have a smile, and that just brings a smile to my face. It's a good thing. We began as a group of 12 people. We grew to 120, and now we've taken a bit of a hit with the pandemic, but we're still here. And we're still vibrant, as you could see on Easter weekend and last Saturday at our celebration for Roger. We may look a bit different now with one pastor instead of two, or none, I guess, anyway. But we have new ministry teams, a teaching team, and a worship leading team that will join our long-standing teams of music leaders and worship design folks. For me, and I hope for you, the future looks bright. If we imagine that these past 2 years have been a bit of a death where we as a FaithWorks community haven't been able to do the things we've always done, what might it look like to get back to those things now that we're rising out of isolation. Like Tabitha, we've returned bodily to community, and little things like bringing back the coffee cart remind us of who we were before. What else have we forgotten? To what do we need to return? And what new things might be coming? In our world, these past 2 years haven't just been about COVID. We've been reminded of the harm of racism with the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis and the emergence of Black Lives Matter. We've been troubled by the multiple discoveries of unmarked graves at former residential schools beginning in Kamloops, BC. And we're currently witnessing the horror of war in Ukraine. What do we do with all of this? We may be tempted to shrug our shoulders. It's just all too much. What can we do as a small faith community with limited resources of money and time and energy? We can barely pay our own bills, and we're already doing lots of good stuff, and maybe there isn't anything more or different we're called to. Or maybe there is. Whatever we conclude, it's important to ask the questions, to be open to the possibilities, to discern together, and be ready to rise to whatever Jesus is calling us to. Whether that's more of the same or something a little different. Barbara Johnson says, "We're Easter people living in a Good Friday world." That's the important thing. The thing we must never forget, we're Easter people. Now here's where tonight's teaching time is going to shift a little so that we can hear from each other and not just from me, and we're not going to quite do it the way that she had said here, but we're going to walk through this a little bit anyway. We haven't had a Q&A in a long time, and I know that was usually something Roger would do, but I want to keep the tradition going. She says, so in a few minutes I'm going to open the floor to hear from you. Unfortunately, I don't have any A's for the Q's, so we won't completely do that part. But I'm going to try to still make this a practical exercise. If we collectively imagine Jesus saying to us, FaithWorks, get up, what do you think that looks like? What do you think Jesus is calling us to in this new season of our life together? Is there anything that we need to return to? Are there new opportunities to explore? First, let's take a moment in prayer and silence. Jesus, we love you because you first loved us. Thank you for drawing us together into a community that lives by your Spirit and trusts in your grace. As we sit in silence now, give us faith and fill us with peace. Remind us of who we are and show us who you want us to be. Jesus, we imagine you calling us. FaithWorks, get up. And we wonder what that means. Help us to listen for your voice. Thank you for your presence with us, Jesus. Thank you for leading and guiding us and for believing in us. Amen. So what are we hearing? What do we think Jesus is calling us to? Is there anything we need to return to? Are there new opportunities to explore? And we won't be doing the Q&A today, but if you've been thinking about something, if something has grabbed your attention, I'm going to encourage you to send a note Pastor Melanie's way and say, here's something, however strongly you feel or don't feel about it, here's something that I was thinking about as I was listening to your words. We might consider this, or we might consider that. Or this is something I'm actually feeling very deeply about. That this is a new opportunity for FaithWorks community as we look forward to what is next. Or I really hope we don't stop doing this thing, whatever that thing is that you really hope we don't stop doing. I think it'd be fantastic for Pastor Melanie to be able to hear that. So in her absence today, I'm going to encourage you to shoot her an email this week. Say, get well soon. Hope you're doing fine. Missed you in church on Saturday night. And here's the thing I really want to talk to you about, whatever that might be. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Melanie and Randy, for the challenge this evening and going forward too. As we move from the Word of